2, 1. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another exciting adventure here on Inside Movies Galore. I am one of your hosts, but today we are diving back into the mind of a good friend of ours, Dane. So, Dane, why don't you tell us, since we are celebrating our 5 years of being online, what movie did you subject us this week?
Well, continuing our series on the Rocky movies, because it's my birthday month, I figured, well, if we got 6 slots, why not talk about Rocky 1 through 6? So last week we talked about Rocky 1 and 2, and so today we are talking about Rocky 3, which is from 1982 and written and directed by and starring Sylvester Stallone, continuing the saga of Rocky Balboa from where we last left him in Rocky 2. And as I said before we went live, the nice thing about this series is that each of the movies pretty much seamlessly flow into each other, and even the ones like Rocky Balboa, that one, even though it takes place many years later, it still feels like a natural continuation of that story. It doesn't feel weird or out of place. And this film is no exception. And for some of us here in the virtual room here, it is their favorite. So it's not my favorite, but for some of us it is, and we will be getting into that in a little bit. But I assume, as we are going around the room, I assume that this is not a first-time watch for any of us, correct? Because most of us have watched it like one after the other, if I recall.
No, it was my first
You
time.
are incorrect.
Oh, well, then you should go first. Whoever's first time it was, they should go first.
Don't you dare.
Yeah, the only one that I remember watching actually was number 1 and maybe number 2, but I don't
Okay.
remember watching any of the other ones. I knew that Mr. T was in it. That was about all I knew.
Yeah. So what was your impression of this one, having seen it for the first time, pretty much?
I thought it was pretty good. I mean, I'm not really usually into these type of movies, the boxing thing. But again, like the other two, there was definitely a storyline, not just the boxing. And you know, um, I I really, I thought it was good. Mr. T was really goading him in this big time. Um, and I can see why he finally gave in when he wanted to retire. Um, but in the end, I think he not only learned he part of it is he felt like he later found out that he wasn't really living up to his whole potential with having won because of the fights that he was being given. So I like how he built his confidence gets built up and his respect for himself gets rebuilt up in this movie. I like how that's done.
When we fought, you had the eye of the tiger, man, the edge, and now you got to get it back. And the way to get it back is to go back to the beginning. You know what I mean? That's basically the movie in a nutshell.
Right.
So that was your first time. Anybody else, was this their first time?
Not
Yeah,
right.
this was.
Oh, go ahead.
It was your first time.
Yeah.
All right, well, tell us.
Well, again, slight caveat to that. I do remember that they put on the Rocky movies a couple of times in choir class, and I could not tell you which ones they were. I can tell you I saw only bits and pieces. So I may have seen parts of this movie, but I have never sat down and watched the movie. And that was many, many years ago that I may have even seen parts of it. And I will go ahead and lump in since technology is evil and sucks, and I was unable to be here for the second one, I'll go ahead and say I did get my first viewing of that one in, and I can say confidently that was a first time watch. and briefly say that that was a good one. I enjoyed it. This one definitely, I can see how some people say like the first two were kind of a little, well, you could almost call the first one, in a sense, the movies kind of went through the same trajectory that Rocky kind of did. Like the first one was the scrappy underdog, like was kind of rough around the edges and all that kind of stuff, but you really wanted to go for it. And then the second one was a little more seasoned, had a little more, and then this one was downright slick compared to those two.
Oh, totally.
And there definitely were some parts that, kind of screamed, this is now in the mainstream kind of deal.
Totally.
The Hulk Hogan cameo and even the pop song. I mean, it's great that I can finally say I saw the movie Eye of the Tiger came from. And it is a great song. Absolutely. One of the most iconic pieces of music from movie history. So much so that people forget it's from the third movie. And but yeah, the first two didn't have. What's that?
I was saying I definitely did. I mean, every time I think of Rocky, I think Eye of the Tiger.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like the first two didn't have that 80s power rock ballad going for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, this thing is 80s in all caps.
Yeah. Yes. And then, of course, the big screen splashy. It says introducing Mr. T at the beginning. I see he had a couple credits before this, but like this really introduced him to the world in a big way. And I was very happy when I finally did. At one point in the movie, you do get to hear him say, "I pity the fool." And I loved it. And I was like, that's great. Probably the first time he said that on screen.
I believe it was. And so you can thank Stallone for writing that dialogue.
I pity the fool.
Giving him his catchphrase.
So it's it's a good one. I honestly came into this with lowered expectations. I wasn't sure what I would make of it. I absolutely do feel that the series is growing on me as I go, and so I look forward to seeing more of them.
It's hard for it not to be honest.
I definitely agree because when I found out that we were doing these, I was like, really? And I agree. They've been growing on me, and I've been getting more and more interested and looking forward to the next one also.
And I gotta give a movie mad points I guess I gotta give Hulk Hogan points for showing up on screen, showing up on the set to play a character called Thunderlips.
That's the name of the game. We're gonna get to Thunderlips, don't you worry.
Thunderlips comes on you.
I swear, we don't get another wrestling match like this until Spider-Man.
I mean,
I just couldn't believe how much bigger he was than Stallone. I did not realize he was that much bigger.
Stallone's not that big of a guy, like height-wise, and actually,
Mr. T isn't either. Really.
Well, no, he's not. He's bulky for sure, but like the Stallone is actually not super tall, and also, if you notice, in this movie in particular, he's in incredible shape, but he's also doesn't have quite the bulk that he had in 1 and 2. He's actually quite slimmed down. He looks very
more toned.
He looks very toned and very like spry, but he doesn't have quite that bruiser body that he once did.
Yeah, he definitely was bulked up in the second one.
I definitely know.
I just freaked out when they first got in the ring and they're standing there looking at each other. I was like, "Holy shit, man!" Look at the difference.
I know. The commentators even say he looks like a middleweight, which this is probably the slimmest and trimmest that he is in the entire series. And it makes sense relative to the different style that he has.
And we get the best line in the movie right then. How much you think he eats? 202 pounds and weighing over here,
Yeah,
Rocky.
that's a great line.
202 pounds. And he kind of looks at Mickey like, not so funny, you know?
Well, Kroll, you're kind of chomping at the bit here. So this is your favorite Rocky movie.
It is. It
So
is.
go for it.
I love wrestling. I've been a fan since you know, for a long time. I did not see this when it came out. I saw it after I was a wrestling fan. I became a wrestling fan before WrestleMania 3, somewhere in between WrestleMania 2. So I saw Mr. T and Hulk Hogan tag team together in wrestling and WrestleMania 2, and I saw Mr. T fighting in a boxing match in regular wrestling, not WrestleMania, against Roddy Piper. That was all kinds of crazy match. Because you know, Roddy Piper being a bad guy, a heel at the time, was very racist, which I heard wasn't even an act, but it was crazy for TV. Definitely would not fly these days, but yeah. So I finally saw this, which you know had led to him being in wrestling. So I really enjoyed it. Loved seeing, like I said, so to me, my introduction to Mr. T was pretty much was wrestling, and you know, and then I saw Rocky 3, and of course A-Team, and then later the cartoon and stuff. But so I've always been a big Mr. T fan as well. But Hulk Hogan is my favorite wrestler, so it was huge. I mean, to me, it wasn't even about watching a Rocky movie. I had seen the other two before I saw the third one, but you know, it wasn't even big deal. I didn't even care about Rocky at the moment that I watched it because I just wanted to see Hulk Hogan and Mr. T and stuff. Although I did root for Rocky, you know, in both cases because I just can't root for the heels.
Is your favorite movie of all time No Holds Barred with Hulk
It is
Hogan?
not. It is not. But I do enjoy that movie.
I would
Star
think
Wars
you'd
is
be in
always my
heaven
favorite
with that
movies.
movie.
But yeah,
What about
I mean,
Santa with muscles?
I have not seen that one. I just heard about that one, so I'll have to check it out.
The
I
title's
saw the
better than the
Commando
movie.
and of course the Nanny one were great too.
Mr. Nanny, yeah.
He was never the greatest actor, but
Well, who's really seeing a Hulk Hogan movie for that? I mean, let's
exactly,
be real.
he does his part for what you expect him to do. You know,
Mr. Danny was
so
just like
funny, really
funny
funny.
as all hell.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. A lot of times Hulk Hogan plays himself, but in Rocky he didn't. He played more like Macho Man.
I was gonna say, like, if anything, I mean, I don't correct me if I'm wrong on the timeline, but like, if I had my pick, it's like that role probably should have gone to Macho Man if you were to just cast, you know, based on type. You know, I don't know, was he operating back then?
Hulk
That
Hogan
would have been
was-
cool.
Hulk Hogan
Macho
was
Man was one of my
champion
favorite wrestlers.
Hulk Hogan was a champion at the time, so they wanted the real wrestling champion to be in the movie as the wrestling champion.
Yeah,
So,
I figured.
that's why they did that, and that was. I'm thinking that was. I think was Macho Man even in wrestling?
I don't think he was. That's why.
Or he might have been in wrestling, but he wasn't as big. So I mean, in a way, maybe Macho Man saw that and tailored his gimmick after it. You know, who knows? I'm not saying he did, but it's possible because you know it definitely felt more like Macho Man than Hulk Hogan, and you know there wasn't really a Macho Man then. So I mean,
Yeah, if I were him, I'd be
probably
tempted
wrestling.
to like make fun of him, you know, through that character or like emulate him or what, because that so wasn't Hulk Hogan's persona.
I know. Well,
you know?
he was kind of Macho Man, but he was also kind of like I don't know.
Well, there are a lot of.
I can't think of his name. I can picture him.
Well, there was
he
a ton of them. There was
he
Ric
wore
Flair.
his
There
picture
was
on his shorts and stuff, and He thought he was God's gift to women and stuff. Had
Not exactly uncommon for pro
long black
wrestlers of
hair
that
and stuff.
time.
He
Ric
kind of
Flair?
That's what I said.
no,
Rick.
no. We had black hair. No,
Jake the Snake?
no. Jake Snake never had a picture of himself on his own ass.
But
Um,
okay, so
Rick
just curious.
Raj
Outs-
Rick Rude.
Yeah, I was gonna say Rick Rude. Now,
Yeah.
outside of everything having to do with Thunderlips, what do you think of the film?
Yeah, and like I said, I was a big fan of Mr. T, so I thought it was great. You could see, the way Rocky was training or not really training, and the way Clubber T was training. He was gonna beat the hell out of him. You could see that coming easily. He was just gonna beat him. And yeah, they go in there, and Rocky didn't even last 2 rounds. Unlike the fight we saw with Apollo, where both matches were just incredible and long. And of course, Creed, of course, couldn't stand the way Clubber was, what a dick he was, and he's like, you can see kind of his comeback in training Rocky. So I mean, even though he wasn't boxing anymore himself, he knew that Rocky wasn't done. Even if Rocky said he was done, he knew Rocky wasn't done. So it's great how he comes to him and just ask wants to train him and stuff. Of course, at that point we lost his trainer, and that was sad. That was definitely the saddest moment in the whole series, in my opinion. But yeah, so and then even then when he says he wants to get him back and all, he still isn't in it. He finds out that his men were handpicked, his matches. There wasn't anybody that would like him that would have kicked his ass, or like Clubber Lang was, and so he felt like he wasn't as good as he thought he was, and basically some of the things that Clubber Lang had been saying about him seemed to be true, that he wasn't really fighting real men or whatever. So he definitely lost faith in himself, and he was scared. And I absolutely love the way his wife was like. It's funny how before she was like so set against him fighting, and she definitely would rather like him retire, but she knew that he would not be happy with himself at that point. So she got in on him and was like, no, what's your problem? What's your issue? Really tell me. And he finally admitted it. And she got him to see the light of day and fight back and train hard. And when he came in there looking, he was like a cross between Apollo Creed and Rocky at that point at the final fight, and it was great. It was a really great fight. I mean, he was just demolishing him, and then he went back to his style where he let Clubber Lang beat on him. He was like, give me it, keep going. Is that all you got? And he's just going him and taking his best hits and just keep coming back, and he pounded him into next week. What was that, 3rd round? It seemed like. So it was pretty awesome. It was a cool fight, and then of course the fight at the end, the quick. I mean, we don't see them actually fight, but I love the way they end it. Pretty cool, where they're both about to punch each other in the face. And then it ends, and it's really cool. It was funny how he kept saying, you owe me, what's the favor? You find out the one more fight, not in front of anybody, just for their own sake, Yeah, it was just a really fun movie. It did resemble the other 2 movies in ways, like the 2 movies combined together, where he loses and then he wins, and he was kind of like Creed in the first one, when he lost, he went in thinking, whatever, big deal, Billy's reigned, I'll just go in and beat the hell out of this guy, and and Mickey kept trying to get him to go back to the way he was before. Go back to the beginning and stop with all this crap and the luxury and everything. He didn't listen very well at all. But it was great fun. But I'll let someone else talk.
Well, I don't even need to do a plot summary now. I think you
Sorry.
did it. Dustin joined the chat here, and you saw him one after the other. You said last time. Any particular bits of impressions of Rocky 3? Dustin?
I'm trying to think here. Well, I pretty much saw them all at once. It was, the more I think about it, I think it was like one of those old Spike TV marathons they used to have for movies like this.
Yeah.
And I remember, I think, liking this one a little bit more than the first two because it was like Apollo was a good opponent, but this is the first of Rocky's like serious like villains.
Oh yeah, this guy's an antagonist, pure and simple.
Exactly. So I think that added a lot to like the stakes of this battle.
Well, and Clubber's they were fighters, but they weren't killers like this guy.
Well, he arguably kills Mickey. Like I think you can make that claim.
Yeah. Well, and he's just an absolutely brutal fighter, and he clearly wants it bad, and acts upon it. So,
Yeah, I used to do a lot of bodybuilding, and I always remembered Clubber Lang's training routine whenever I was in the gym. Like I would just think of those scenes. Like I would see other people like doing like 3 or 4 reps and going home when I still had like a whole other routine to do that day, and just thinking about that. So that's one thing that always stuck out in my mind from this movie. And that really does highlight just the difference in the two characters.
Mm-hmm.
Like Clubber Lang is taking this as seriously as possible, and Rocky is just like, yeah, I'll win, it'll be fine.
Yeah,
the same mistakes Apollo made.
Yeah, the same hubris of Apollo. But yeah, Clubber is easily the best thing about the movie, and we will definitely examine him in more detail after we get everybody's impressions. I don't know, assuming you have nothing else more to add.
This is a great movie. Like it's as good as the other sequels.
It leads naturally.
I maintain my position that Rocky 1 through 4 are equally good.
They're wonderful movies. I really dig them.
Some people have complained about like Rocky 4, but we'll get there.
We will.
We will do it.
I
think they're nuts, personally. But
I love Rocky 4. Like
the next person, I guess.
Objectively, it's ridiculous, but of course we will get there. I
love the only thing ridiculous is that robot. Everything else is fine and makes sense.
Dave, anything further to add on your impressions of Rocky 3?
Well, this is probably my second time watching Rocky 3. I saw it back when it was on USA television, and I ended up picking it up Rocky like 1 through 6 all in a row when I got them on DVD. But I've never fully like marathon them on my own. They've just kind of sat on my shelf because I always thought that they would like come on TV and I'd marathon them again, and I just haven't. So I remember watching like 1, 2, 4, and 5 maybe once, but it is vague, and 6 I barely even remember. So, and I haven't seen either of the Creeds. So, when I coming to this, it is like rewatching it again. So I did not remember that Hulk Hogan was in it.
How could you forget me?
Well, because sports movies are not my thing, and entirely, it was more my dad's thing. And I think there are good sports movies out there. I mean, but when it comes to sports, it's kind of like football scores. They just go in through one ear and out the other. So, that being said, I did remember that Mr. T was in here. I did not remember him being as small as he was. I remember him in 18 quite a lot, and I remember him from a movie called DC Cab.
Great movie.
But I guess I remember him a little bit more beasted up than he looks. So he is definitely a memorable character in this film, and I like it. So it's not like it's wow, I want to see this again, but it's decent. I mean, it's not like it was worse than the other ones, and I do enjoy the fight scenes and stuff like that. And I do return. I do like the turnaround and the end product. So other than that, that's pretty much it for me.
Okay. And lastly, Brandon, anything further to add about first impressions?
Well, I have a slightly different than most on this. This is not my first time watching it, but it's probably my least watched of the Rocky films. I probably watched it maybe 3 times total.
Even more so than Rocky 5.
I know I've watched Rocky 5 probably at least 5 times.
Okay.
So I would say this one definitely the least. I'd come back to it a few years back when I was just revisiting to try and remember it a little bit. And then, of course, again for this. And it's always been one that I've never really cared for on the Rocky movies. It's not my least favorite. That still belongs to 5, though my rewatch of 5 later on might change my mind. But this one, to me, was the one that I felt like was a disappointment. The first movie was such a spectacular film. The second movie was a good film. This one, it felt like it was trying to do too much and didn't really. I'd like to say that it could have been better than it was. It was okay. I'm not going to say I disliked the movie, but it was definitely a disappointment overall for me. I felt like there were things I had that I didn't care as much for in it, and maybe I misremembered in the past when I was watching it again. And I just thought, giving us Mr. T was the best thing about this film, and I stick to it.
Well, my own experience with Rocky 3 is not that dissimilar from most people here because I did watch them all in a row. More or less, I watched them on one of those AMC marathons they would always do. And I remember this film pretty much echoing a lot of what people said. I felt like Mr. T was easily the best thing about it. I think that it had a ton of great scenes, a ton of great moments. The fights are definitely bigger scale, much louder, more polished sound effects. Get to see, the fights as far as fights go, they're much more heavily choreographed and obviously Eye of the Tiger is wonderful. There's so much about this film that's so great, and especially the glue that really holds the movie together is the relationship between Rocky and Apollo that began as a rivalry in the first 2 movies, and you really believe that it would get to where it gets, and you believe the reasons why they have the relationship they have. That being said, this is definitely my second least favorite of the series. Like, it's ahead of 5, and I wouldn't exactly call it bad, but I think that the first half is very padded. And I think the biggest problem with the movie is that you can sum it up very, very quickly in terms of what it's about. Rocky gets kind of stale at the top. It's lonely at the top, loses the title, has to get down to his gritty roots and rediscover the Eye of the Tiger, wins the title back, the end. like it's pretty simple, and so to fill the time, we have a lot of moments, some of which are more important than others, and it just the first half in particular just kind of takes its sweet time getting there. But that being said, the good stuff in this movie is really, really good because Clubber Lang's a great villain. Eye of the Tiger's a great secondary theme. And I think they kind of knew that you could only hear Gonna Fly Now so many times before it starts to lose its value. And plus, you know, it was kind of neat to have a secondary theme that was a little bit more appropriate for the 80s, and of course we'll dive into that more when we get to music. But the stuff that's good in this movie is really, really good, but it's just more of, just like the character, it's a little too comfortable on its laurels in certain ways, and it can take its sweet time getting to the serious dramatic weight. But then again, as far as 80s cheese goes, this one and four are some of the most, cheese-tastic as far as the 80s movies go. Um, I do not need to do a plot summary because Kroll did a fantastic job of basically running through all the main story beats. I mean, we will inevitably cover certain moments, but like as far as the story overall, you pretty much covered off everything. Um, but some interesting we've already covered the characters more or less extensively in the other two episodes. Some notable points of difference, I think, in this one is that, as we mentioned before, Stallone is in incredible shape in this one. Rocky is looking very, very toned. His boxing technique has improved considerably because he was such a lumbering mass of flesh, very uncoordinated in the first two movies, could take a lot of abuse and could dish it out, but he would just, lumber around for most of the fight until he sprung back, kind of at the last minute, more or less. But then even before Apollo's training, you notice his technique improves by
Yeah.
quite a lot. And that so as much as he is a little overly comfortable as a champion, admittedly, I have to say, his technique has noticeably improved. So good for him on that level. And Stallone easily in some of the best shape he was ever in. And I have to say, from Rocky 2 and Rocky 3, Stallone's hair is unbelievably, perfectly coiffed, and it's like just unreal, like how much body it has. You watch Rocky's hair
Right.
throughout the series, and it too evolves. But I just was like, wow, that's
It's its own
incredible.
character.
Actually,
Kinda
the
is,
hair in the movie overall, you got Mr. T's weird ass sideburns and mohawk. You got
Yep.
Oh, yeah,
Hulk Hogan's handlebar mustache.
Yep.
You've definitely got some strange and impressive displays.
Yeah, this is like hair club for men, what they all wish that they could get, But but as far as a character, I mean, Rocky, again, still the same basic person, but a notable point of difference here is that you notice that his particular speech mannerisms are nowhere near as pronounced. Like they're still there, but
Right.
they're not anywhere near as pronounced. And what I took that to mean is
Right.
that he's probably received a lot of PR coaching at this point,
Right.
and he probably has learned how not to sound quite so dumb, and ill-educated and that kind of stuff.
I noticed in that opening montage that he was shilling all sorts of products.
American
yeah.
Express.
Given his disastrous attempt to do a commercial in the second one,
Yes.
it definitely sounds like his managers must have been like, you need some
Okay.
diction courses.
Oh yeah, he's definitely been schooled, which and I want to devote a special section to that opening montage just because I didn't fully appreciate just how
You need
good.
a montage.
Yeah, for real. I
It
didn't
was
fully
great.
I
Stuff
didn't
like
fully appreciate how good that montage is and how much critical visual information we get to see and hear in the course of just a few minutes. So, I mean, we're so busy being absorbed in the awesomeness that is Eye of the Tiger that a lot of key character information is being communicated in that montage. And I'll get to that in just a second. But as far as Rocky goes, yeah, his mannerisms are there, but they're more muted in this one and in 4 because he's at the top of his game. He's, received a lot of coaching. He's very refined, relatively speaking. And, so that's a notable evolution, but it's all
I
about,
think,
You
rediscovering
got
more
civilized.
roots.
Worst thing that can
yeah, you
happen to
got
a fighter.
civilized.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The worst thing happened to you. The worst thing that can happen to any fighter. You got civilized. Yep. And it's true. And that is what this is all about. It's about, someone who's at the top can get too comfortable and you have to still maintain your edge to, remember why you got there in the first place. And that's an important lesson. But yeah, those are some notable character bits for Rocky. Apollo, he's someone who by this point, the prideful champion though he was in 1 and 2, and he's still got that kind of, athletic champion prideness aspect to him, but he is noticeably more humbled. And we first really get to catch up with him when he's commentating the fight, and you get the sense that if circumstances had prevailed a different way, he could have, had a good second half of his life being a really good, commentator or, hosting a show on boxing or could have been a regular on ESPN or something like
Right.
that, like he's definitely something that distinguishes him
Civilized.
from, well, something that distinguishes him from both Rocky and Clubber Lang is that he always had the gift of gab. He always had charm. He always was articulate and charismatic, and that is perfect for the realm of commentating. And so you can see that he fits into that world really, really well. But you also see some of his old self in where Rocky is now, and so obviously you understand why he feels compelled to help his former rival there. He sees some of himself in Rocky.
Well, in all fairness, a big part of it also is that Clubber treated him like absolute shit when they
Yeah,
met.
that too.
It's like Clubber was, and we'll get to him in a minute, I'm sure. But
Yeah.
if for Apollo, it had to be Sting to be treated with that level of disrespect by anyone.
For sure.
It's
For
like,
sure.
yeah,
Which, I mean, well, I want to touch on it's leading into that. I want to touch on the montage specifically because it does lead directly into Clubber Lang's character, and it
right.
illuminates dimensions of his character that I did not previously think were there. And here's what I mean. So, the montage is really, really good because it shows the obvious thing besides Eye of the Tiger. The obvious thing is that you see Rocky. Yeah, he's beating a lot of opponents and everything, but he's also doing all the cushier aspects of fame and fortune. He's doing commercials. He's on the Muppets, the Muppet Show. He's on the talk shows. He's on the magazine covers, all that stuff. And then Clubber is, brimming with either resentment or whatever at this guy. And he wants what he has. He does what you should do and train really hard. And he's clearly doing it with aggression and all that kind of stuff. So he's down and dirty. He's training hard. And Rocky's just enjoying fame more or less. And that's the montage in a nutshell. But an interesting, you guys can tell me if I'm way off base or not, but this is an interesting kind of sociological phenomenon I observed. So, you had Apollo Creed in the first 2 movies, who was an analog for Muhammad Ali. Um, and Muhammad Ali, obviously was a black icon, but also was a very articulate person. And, Apollo, very similar. You do get kind of the sense that he has perhaps acclimated to the sports world, to the world of the rich and famous relatively easily because of his charm and everything. And then I'm thinking about how uh I'm thinking about how uh I remember Eddie Murphy and Eddie Murphy Raw. This was around the time that Rocky 3 had come out, and he was saying that, he made the joke about Italian Americans and African Americans standing online to watch a Rocky movie, and how Italians would go crazy to watch a black guy get beat up by Rocky and that kind of stuff. It was obviously, part of his humor at the time. But then I got to thinking about it, and I got to thinking about how much, Carl Weathers put into the character of Apollo Creed, to be this, good, kind of example of a black man who was strong and charismatic and a, interesting character and everything like that. And I thought about Clubber Lang, and I looked back at that montage, and not all, it is a relatively even split, but a lot of the opponents that Rocky is facing that Clubber's in the audience for are predominantly black. And then a lot of the opponents that Clubber fights are predominantly white. I want to say that is probably not as intentional as I'm thinking it might be, but what I'm saying is that I suspect that Clubber, part of his aggression towards Apollo in particular, is that he, possibly has more of an axe to grind than we maybe necessarily might have thought. I mean, I think the character could work without that, but I'm just saying that I think that he
I hear what you're saying.
isn't quite as acclimated to, the predominantly like white establishment world in the way that Apollo has become.
Like he wasn't really a black guy, he was just black, like they said, like Obama,
Well, and what I'm bringing it up because I never quite understood what I understood why a Clubber had it out for Rocky because, well, he wants the title and everything. And he felt
Right.
like Rocky was getting soft and all that stuff. But what I'm saying is that relative to the social tensions of the time, and also relative to what somebody like Clubber might think of someone like Apollo, because I never really understood what he had out for Apollo in particular, but then I'm like, oh, maybe there's some other element there. But go ahead.
Yeah, makes sense.
He sees him as a sellout, essentially.
Yeah.
That's the simple of it. To me, I think that Clubber Lang is a lost opportunity. They really made him into a very simple character.
Yeah.
And the character, when you start out there's a lot more promise to it because you can see like so much anger, so much rage.
Mm-hmm.
And there could have been more expansion on the character instead of some of the weird stuff like the wrestling event and all this stuff. Instead of doing that, you could have actually expanded on the character. I mean,
well, from a character perspective, I get what you mean, because I picked that up on that this time, and I did not pick up on that when I was a kid. And to be fair, for a relatively underdeveloped villain, like comparatively speaking, Clubber Lang, and Mr. T specifically as the actor, is so memorable. He really, you do not forget him. He is so on point. But I agree with you on a character level. The pieces are there. They're just buried more underneath the surface than perhaps they should be.
In my opinion, that's less the character and more the actor.
Very
that
possibly,
brought that memorability to the character. Well, I do think that if written better and given more depth, a little bit more of the hatred and expanding that last fight scene, which is my biggest gripe with the movie, I think that this could have been as good as 2, maybe even better. Because it had a lot of stuff to it that could have been really good, but I felt like it moved to camp.
I think part of it is that, and this may be part of the reason why the film strikes some as being a little more campy or a little less realized maybe than the others, is from the word go. Apollo is given dimension and is treated as a well, again, part of that is Carl Weathers' performance. Part of that is the writing. They really do give him a lot to work with, and he takes it and runs with it.
Everything having to do with Apollo is great.
But this was one of Mr. T's first roles. And from what I was reading in the trivia, and I'm sure, Dane, you probably know more on this subject than I do, but from what I saw in the trivia, it seems that they wanted to give Mr. T more dimension as an actor. Some of the people involved in the film were like, man, he's just not that deep or something along those lines. And Stallone's like, that's what I want. I want that raw focus.
Mhm.
And so he thought that if they gave him acting classes, it would have ruined him.
Which I mean, I kind of honestly, I kind of get what he's saying. I mean, to be fair, like I think Mr. T knocks it out of the park. I mean, I think he's incredible. But I agree with you. I think that he probably, I do think he could have handled more dimension, but I just the fact of the matter is this guy, he to me he strikes me as someone who, because like we see him when he's training.
The villain.
But when we see him training, like it's not in nice areas. Like he mentions he's in an apartment. He's probably, faced a lot of hardship in his life. He seems like someone, a lot of bad stuff's probably happened to him. And to respond to that, instead of going the Apollo route, which is, be articulate and, kind of, I'm sure Clubber would probably say, suck up to white people. Instead of doing that, he was very angry and very hard edged, and and literally everything about just looking at the guy, it's like you do not want to mess with this guy. And besides the mohawk and the sideburns, it's like he's got the earrings and
his eyes,
everything about him, everything about him says, back off, I'm not one of you, and very intentionally so. And there are people like that, and I'm sure for some of them it might work, but it wouldn't necessarily make them the most loved people in the world. I mean, I in the chat, I called him the Kanye West of boxing for a reason.
He would probably be offended by that if he could see Kanye's antics.
Yeah, probably.
And I can tell you that I don't think that the anger or the rawness of him would have been dulled by adding more to the character. Yes, I think taking him through classical acting classes and stuff might have, but adding an extra bit of writing, adding a little bit more motive other than he is just mean, which
Well, I mean, again, I didn't think that at all. I saw the racial tension there. To me, that was as big a part of the character as his desire to win. I saw to me, it was obvious that he despised Stallone for being a white dude, and that he despised Apollo for being a sellout. That to me came through loud and clear. So I didn't think there was any issue with his motivation.
Well, look at how he propositioned Rocky's wife.
Well, he did that very obviously to, because he was like, I'm going to get Balboa
and
to
he
go.
did.
And understandably so. I mean, I think any guy with any self-respect wouldn't exactly take that lying down, but it's I have to say, and that's why I'm glad I watched it now that I'm older, because as a kid, I wasn't thinking about that at all. I was just like, I want to, see Rocky go up against this guy because he's extremely memorable. But I see the racial tension stuff now more than ever, and especially in the second half, which again, we'll get there when we get there. But, there's a lot underneath the surface. And I brought up the Eddie Murphy example because obviously it was in the air for him to bring it up in the first place. And it was in the air even in one, for Carl Weathers to approach Apollo the way that he did. So it's interesting to look at it through that lens now. And, if they were ever to bring the character of Clubber Lang back in like a, Creed 3 or whatever, it'd be interesting to kind of see. I know Stallone has said, Stallone has said in interviews and stuff, he was like, if I were to put it into a script, Clubber Lang would be a fight analyst and an evangelist, which I think is interesting. I could totally see that, but what that would tell me is that he would have kind of calmed down for where he was, but also I would just be interesting to it would be interesting to see relative to all the various, racial happenings that have happened in the last few years, just kind of to what degree they would or wouldn't explore that through him. Because if you were to ever explore that particular angle through a character who would know the before and the after, it would be clever.
Yeah.
I just think that'd be an interesting opportunity. Whether they go with it or not, that I don't know. But
And I think that a lot more is superimposed on him than really is in reality. In person, that character would have been out for blood regardless of who held the championship.
yeah,
He wanted the
Yeah.
championship. It
And-
could have been a person of color up there on the stage. It wasn't because of that. It was
no,
because of this. Now they could have done something with it, but again, there's nothing mentioned about it other than maybe some subtleties. But again, you yourselves as the audience are the ones to superimpose those beliefs onto him. Now, whether that's intentional or not, that's a good question.
well, it is if it's there, it is definitely subtext, unquestionably. And I agree with you. I think it would have worked pretty much the same as far as how the text is written. I think it would have worked more or less if the character were any other race, or if Rocky was a different race or whatever. I think the on his basic level, it's someone who's hungry, wants it, and will do anything to get it, and just beats Rocky's ass and gets it. I think that still works regardless. I think that's an example of perhaps either actors giving something of themselves to it, or us observing the social climate of the time and that sort of thing, or perhaps a combination of the two. I just thought it was an interesting observation because I most definitely did not pick up on that when I was a kid. But
And
that's
those poor
age and wisdom will do
tigers,
to you.
all those poor tigers who lost their eyes in the making of this film.
Oh, I know. But and we have touched on the ties to wrestling with the Thunderlips fight. I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say that moment is one of the silliest moments in the entire series. And Rocky, and Rocky 4 gets silly as hell. But most of the silliness of Rocky 4 is still within the basic concepts of reality, in terms of it's not the only thing that's really shark jumping is the robot, but most of the rest of it is a fight between two boxers, and it's just more the degree to which they take it and how it's shown and all that stuff. But this, the only thing you can say about the Thunderlips fight is just that it's a charity stunt, or it's kind of funny that this scene is in this movie and it was made when it was, because nowadays, I'm thinking of the famous Andy Kaufman, Jerry Lawler feud. Nowadays, we know that stuff was all staged, and obviously the business hadn't been exposed yet in 1982, but that nowadays it's that would very clearly be have been a gimmick. And not to say that it's not here, but it's just you get the impression that Thunderlips just kind of takes it to the next level, and Rocky doesn't really know what he's getting into. But still, I was just as it's memorable for sure, but I was just this is just eating up valuable screen time, and sure, it's cool to see Hulk Hogan and everything, but I was just this is really silly, and not in such a way that necessarily adds to the narrative. It's not really telling us anything we don't already know about the guy, Rocky. I mean, that we know.
We don't need to. It's just really great entertainment.
Well, yeah, but I'm just saying, for story wise, it's we're not really learning anything new about the character that we don't already know.
The best stories entertain you, and that was very entertaining.
Yeah, I mean, you get what I'm saying though. Like story wise, you could have
I get what
easily.
you're saying. I'm just trying to counter
Well, it
your
depends on what you're looking for. I mean, in
narrative.
terms of just entertainment value, I will say that 3 and 4 have some of the most like, especially 4 has some of the most like popcorn flick kind of moments in it. Without a question. Um, but yeah, I mean the whole Thunderlips fight, it's memorable, all right, because I would not have expected us to go there, but we did. And now obviously again, pro wrestling was still not new in absolute terms, but new in terms of like the mass consumption of it.
Yeah, 'cause, we had one WrestleMania at that point, and it was big, but still not nowhere near as big as wrestling had gotten.
Yeah.
So it was still in its infant stages, and mostly people, like some territory wrestling here and there, wasn't really worldwide known. WrestleMania helped the first one, but yeah, there was still only one at that time. So yeah.
Well, but and give Stallone credit for being on the forefront of that trend.
Yeah, definitely.
But
I mean, he did the first crossover of wrestling and boxing, and there's been quite a few since on wrestling's end. Um, like Butterball or Butterby, whatever his name was.
Butterbean.
Yeah,
yeah,
and some other guys too. So yeah, it's really he opened the doors for something really great, and Vince saw that and he's like, oh, that's great, and capitalized on Stallone's idea. But yeah,
yeah.
Well,
3. Go ahead.
I mean, to me, I think much like the Goonies, I would look at this as something that, yes, wrestlers are a part of it in a sense, but they could have done that as a publicity short.
Yeah.
And had that, as I say, an extra on the DVD or something that played on TVs and got people's interest up for the film.
then we wouldn't have had the best Rocky movie that we've had.
You're just like dead set on this.
This is the best Rocky movie there is, and I'm not changing my opinion. And the wrestling's a big part of that.
You're entitled to it. I'm not going to take it away from
you. That is true.
Like I said, I will argue my point.
Well, there are people for whom 3 and or 4, they're their favorites, and good for them. I'm not hating on it whatsoever. I'm a big fan, obviously.
Now, I will say that I do think that even as a wrestling movie, I think it's not quite as good as it could be, because I think that they should have, if they wanted to go all the way in, I think that they could have made it more over the top if you wanted to do it.
I mean, they even had.
Well, they had Paulie giving him the chair.
They have, yeah. I was going to say they even had the chair smash. I mean, how great can? I mean, it wasn't a metal.
Oh, no. I mean, like during the Clubber Lang fight, have them break out the chairs and in a boxing match, you could do it and make it like a combined boxing wrestling.
Table ladders and chairs.
That'd be interesting.
Make it into a cage match.
Hadn't been invented yet, but yeah.
Well, interesting Well, actually, speaking back to Stallone's physique, but also tying back into Thunderlips and even Clubber, but Thunderlips specifically. As I mentioned, obviously Stallone was very toned and rather slimmed down in this one, but when you look at him next to Thunderlips, obviously there's the height difference, there's the bulk difference, but particularly just given his physique and everything, I'm like, he really does look like, Little Mac, in the Punch-Out games next to a much bigger opponent.
Yeah.
Because they always made the opponents like ridiculously huge compared to your character,
And speaking of that, Hulk Hogan himself was well toned at that time too.
Oh yeah.
He was in probably one of the best shape of his life. So he was I mean, he was definitely way bulkier.
For sure.
But he was definitely well toned. I mean,
Yeah.
you look at those 24-inch pythons, and you know,
Well, he takes his vitamins and
it's
says his
not just a
prayers, brother.
tagline 24-inch pythons. They really are 24-inch muscles.
Hey,
Like
Hulk
freaking
Hogan
huge.
will always be at his best, in my opinion, in Santa with muscles.
Yeah. Well,
Like I
because
said,
he
I've
has
not
the
seen that movie, so
he has the 24-inch pythons because he takes his vitamins and says his prayers, brother. Because he's
Yeah.
a real American. But I
now
I
you're gonna
found
make now that song's gonna be stuck in my head.
well I mentioned the Punch Out comparison because and I said this in the chat as well, but like, well, Thunderlips and especially Clubber Lang, this is where the antagonists start to resemble Punch Out bosses, or rather, the bosses in Punch Out resemble.
In a way, I think Clubber Lang does kind of remind me of Mike Tyson.
A little bit,
but
Yeah.
you know,
Before
a
Mike
raw-
Tyson.
Yeah.
a raw version of Mike Tyson, maybe. But yeah.
Well,
Well,
but
Punch Out came out in 1984.
yeah,
It was Rocky 3. It was
82.
1982. So, see, maybe. Well, actually, no. I know Rocky had some inspiration on
Now,
the
you
Punch
talking
Out
about
series.
Mike Tyson's Punch Out or just
Yeah.
Well, actually, no. The original arcade game Punch Out was one of Nintendo's original arcade cabinets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had
It
Mike
didn't-
Tyson's Punch Out.
Well, the Mike Tyson part didn't get added until later as part of the American
Right.
localization, if I recall.
I think I just like that better myself, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, but
It
you know,
was fun beating up Mike Tyson.
well, the I bring it up just because obviously that's an important historical parallel, and also the
Great game too.
yeah. Well, in 3 and 4, despite not having as great a story as I do think and maybe more two-dimensional bad guys, they are at the very least extremely memorable. And there is something to be
I
said
can
for
see your
that.
point of that of saying that, but yeah. But
Which
they are 4 is my second favorite, so
which I like 4 a lot too, but yeah, but it's important to, again, we bring up how relatively polished Rocky is in his presentation, and he's doing all the ads and everything. And then you see Clubber, like, he does not have charm or social grace. He's extremely aggressive in and out of the
he's
ring.
close to the way Rocky was before.
No, Rocky was never ever mean
Aggressive.
to anybody.
Well, yeah, he wasn't mean. I'm just saying he's closer to like raw power.
He has the eye of the tiger for sure.
Yeah,
but,
he
but
definitely
no,
has
I mean, but Clubber
raw
is
power.
just, he's the exact same person in and out of the ring, up to and including destroying cameras, telling the press to leave him alone. Like, he is not ever
pushing
gonna
fans
get,
and
well,
But
pushing
he
Mickey
gets really pissed at the press.
and pushing Mickey, which
See,
we haven't really talked
yeah.
about Mickey, Polly, or Adrian.
oh,
and
the heck with Polly. I hated Polly in this one even more than I hated him.
Yeah,
in the
he was a bit of a prat.
we're gonna get to some of his more noteworthy moments in the second half, but honestly, with all 3 of them, there's not a whole lot new to say outside of, I have, like, Talia Shire. They make her look really pretty in 3 and 4 because they got money now.
Like, wow,
She
really great.
does. She and Mickey both do get some good heart-to-heart moments with
They do.
Rocky.
Yeah.
Especially that one training moment where Rocky's just not getting it, and she takes him aside and just tells him what for. I thought that was a pretty good little moment there.
That was a great moment for her. That was
sure.
her. That was her climactic moment.
Exactly.
That's a great scene, and it's nice to see. It's nice to see this character who you could barely get a word out of her in 1. You can really see that she and Rocky have. You believe that
when did you get so tough?
Yeah, but you believe that they have spent so much time together as a married couple, and that they've both grown, and she's more confident than she's ever been, and she's able to see things in him that he doesn't see in himself, and that kind of stuff, and vocalize it. It's all the stuff we knew from 1, but it's just more realized. And but they make it feel like in fact, I'm a little surprised that they never were a real life couple because man, you could
I was
definitely
thinking that
believe it.
myself. I was like, they could have easily have been a couple. I mean, they had such great chemistry, and you can't just, no matter how good of an actor you are, you cannot act chemistry. It's either you have chemistry or you don't. And they had such great chemistry together.
Yeah, and it's funny because then meanwhile Stallone married Brigitte Nielsen from 4, and that marriage didn't last, obviously. But I'm just like,
Is that who you married?
yeah, he married the evil
Well,
Russian woman from 4 for
Apparently,
a little
in
while.
this one, the woman who asked if she could kiss him was his wife at the time.
Mhm.
Oh.
Yeah.
Good
I
little
love
trivia.
that scene. Talia looked like she was shooting daggers.
Oh, yeah.
If looks could kill.
Well, but I'm just saying, like, I don't think that those 3 characters have too terribly much new about them to discover. It's just more, that they're better realized versions of
Yeah.
the characters that we know.
Just made her a little more in depth.
Yeah.
Mickey, I mean, Mickey was pretty much the same as he always was.
Yeah.
You
just, obviously his heart gives out, and Clubber shoving him didn't help at all. I do like that because we never really got to see Adrian interact with Mickey much before, so I do like that they get a little time together.
Yeah.
Not a lot, but it's better than what we
and
had.
you find out that Mickey was living with them too, so
yeah, and that was nice. I mean, probably the most impactful thing that we see from Mickey is that he, not that the fights weren't fixed or anything, but the opponents weren't real challenges for Rocky.
Right, exactly.
And he did it specifically to, protect him health-wise and everything like that, because he does care about Rocky.
Yeah, he does.
I mean, if anything, you do see the love that the 2 guys have for each other the best in this one. And obviously it's because he's, on his way out as a character. So you definitely see that. And of course, Burgess Meredith, of course, class act, all the way through the series.
I don't know why, but I thought Clubber had socked Mickey in the face or something with my last recollection, so it was kind of weird saying I'm just pushed.
Yeah, it wasn't as serious as your memory, but it was serious enough to not do his heart any favors.
There wasn't, I could have seen early recollection made it feel like he was getting revenge, but Mickey's death really didn't play into it at all, if you think about it, into his reasons for wanting to get it. But it was all about wanting it for himself. But still, you could have almost seen a revenge angle there.
Well, that's what they did with 4.
That's what they did exactly with 4.
I mean, I'm kind of glad that it wasn't that way with 3, just because. Go ahead.
I think he had a little bit of that thought in his mind, and that was part of what was messing him up. And that was, and Adrian specifically referenced that when she was talking to him. When she said, "Don't do it for Mickey," I think she was very specifically aware that he had that thought in his brain, but he had so many things competing for space he couldn't decide on.
Well, his skull is very compact. His brain cells are very compact.
Indeed.
Well, and it's okay for him to have multiple feelings about the whole thing, because I mean, he felt like Mickey carried him, and
he felt
perhaps he did
responsible for Mickey's death too. So.
Yeah, well, and that's it's a lot of things going on at once, and Stallone, very, very underrated actor, and an underrated moment in this film. Rocky being a sensitive soul, despite being a fierce warrior in the ring. Stallone is one of very few actors, and let alone like action stars, like super macho action stars, who can absolutely break down, like, blubbering in tears, unintelligible words, the whole 9 yards. He's, like, pretty much the only one I can think of who can do that, and you don't, like, laugh at him, no, you feel for, like, because when Mickey dies, like, he just absolutely breaks down, you cannot understand a word he is saying, but it is such raw emotion that I was like, man, Stallone, that takes talent, because most actors, they only do like the single tear going down the cheek, which almost nobody does in real life. Most people do what Rocky does, which is they absolutely lose it. And they're not trying to look dignified. They're not trying to preserve anything. They are just losing their minds with grief. And Rocky, of course, being an emotional guy, does that with his mentor, his trainer. And and again, Stallone is able to do that in such a way that you don't like think less of him. You don't think he's pathetic or anything like that. You're there with him and you feel his pain. And kudos to Stallone, because that is not easy
Well,
for
yeah,
any actor.
especially since you cannot forget, like, when Mickey first, like, offered his, mentorship, and
Mhm.
he was yelling at him. Well, why weren't you there like 10 years ago? Why
Yeah.
weren't you helping me then? You know.
I needed your help like 10 years ago, right? 10 years ago, you never helped me none. You didn't care, you know? Yeah, that whole thing, I mean, he's a very, underrated actor, because he can be. So, yeah, if we watch Stallone's acting throughout the series, we see that he can play very subtle, very contained, very subtextual acting, He can be angry in a very overt way. He can be grief-stricken in a totally, unrestrained way, in a way that doesn't feel over the top. You believe that this character would react that way. And again, your heart breaks along with him. Like, that is not easy. It really isn't. Because then there are some people in movies who ugly cry and you laugh at them. And you don't do that here. So that's a high point of the movie, I think, in terms of the performance.
Keanu Reeves.
Which and I mean, and again, Clubber, Mr. T, he kind of became a character in and of himself. But like, and again, despite his character not having dementia, I mean, he's not sleepwalking his way through the performance at all. Like, he really is the guy. He's there and he's intimidating. You don't want to mess with this guy. Um, and so they play off each
He's
other really,
pitying
really well.
fools.
Yeah, exactly, and they play off each other really, really well. Um, but obviously, Rocky's another observation that you see, especially in this. Well, you saw it in 2, and you see it in this one in particular. Rocky, again, he's a very emotional person, and he's a very determined person, but his greatest weakness is himself when it comes to self-belief. When he has it, well, the eye of the tiger is more like being hungry, having the desire to, be great and all that, but it's deeper than that. It's self-belief. Like, when he's got it, then he can accomplish unbelievable things. When he doesn't, then he trains very half-heartedly. He doesn't, it's for him, it's a for a not a character who's not exactly renowned for his mental prowess necessarily. He is a character whose mind plays a big role in his success or failure, his willpower. Because when he's distracted or when he just doesn't feel it, then he does not try. Or like in the case of the first fight with Clubber, he's thinking about Mickey the whole time, and so he gets his ass handed to him. It's that's an interesting thing about him, and also just about the wider subject of self-belief and its ability to, have a physical demonstrable effect on one's actions. So
One thing that is different in this film is that they did, in one movie, have the whole entire refight in the same movie.
yes, they did. And which, I mean, Brandon, you mentioned that you felt like that was a bit too rushed.
So what? You wanted the second movie out of it?
Well, that's what
Well,
Brandon was saying.
I thought the second fight, I mean, looking at Tyson, even though that this movie was before Tyson's loss, in 1990. That's a lot of similarities. It was basically, I felt like the fight with Clubber Lang at the end was an afterthought. To me, they could have just as easily gone, yeah, and then he beat him. The end.
Yeah, which to be fair though, I kind of understand why they did it, for the simple reason that there's not there's not a whole lot else new that we could have found out about either fighter. I mean, unless
Oh,
you
I
wanted to put
mean,
in more twists and turns in the fight itself,
and again, I think that, I mean, so much attention was paid to the fights in 1 and 2, and I really feel like this fight was just an afterthought. Let's make it short, sweet, end the movie. We did what we were here to do. I think he put him down on like the 3rd round or something like that.
Right.
Yeah, he
And
really just went for it,
see, to me, I mean, like I said, Tyson, for instance, when he went down, it was the 8th round, and he went, and it was an identical reason for going down. Tyson was used to putting his opponents down by knockout. He was not used to going the distance, and the same thing. Weakness was Clubber. That's why Creed taught Rocky how to box.
Mhm.
And I think that you could have made it a lot more dramatic by sticking it out, give Clubber again more of a dimension. Like I say, I feel like there's more that's given to him than he really shows. But I think that you could have given him even more dimension, extending the fight a little bit longer.
Mhm.
Because
I
most
get
of the
that.
time, I would have at least wanted the fight to go 6 rounds. Give it a chance to have him truly start to tire out. Give it a couple of those, I mean,
Yeah.
shoot, you gave more time to the freaking comedy fight
Yeah.
at the beginning than you gave to this fight. I think that giving it 6 to 8 rounds would have given enough time to give a
It
little
did
bit more
feel like
drama.
they were catering more to Hollywood Hulk Hogan.
Yeah, I
So-
that's a fair point. I mean, on the one hand,
I
thought
need
it
to,
was-
inject here. Hollywood Hulk Hogan was nowhere near a thing in 1982. Okay, he was just
That's when he became a bad guy, wasn't it?
he was completely good. He was completely Hulk Hogan, and everyone loved him in 1982. So just interjecting there.
Well, I get what you're saying though. I would I'll say two things. So one, I actually found it kind of refreshing that the both fights were relatively short, for the simple reason that if every fight was 15 rounds, I think that would have gotten stale.
Right.
I think the
but-
first fight should have been short. I
Yes.
do agree with that. It's the last fight. I think it should have been longer. I don't think it had to be 15 rounds, but I did think that it should have
Yeah.
been longer than it
One
was.
I can
thing I
give you
did
that.
one
Go
thing I
ahead.
did see in the trivia was that apparently the fight still was a few seconds longer than a typical fight. But I will agree, if it had gone 1 or 2 more rounds, it would have definitely driven home the point that he was wearing the guy out.
Mm-hmm.
But from my vantage point, if it had gone beyond 5 rounds, I would have checked out.
Yeah. Well, and again, by that point, it's like we've already seen them fight. We kind of know what they're up to. I mean, what more new could they tell us? That's really the only thing I would say to that. And
The one thing I will say in retrospective to that ending fight is hearing Tammy say, "Look at him duck."
yeah. Well, I was gonna say, like, Rocky, again, his technique, even before the training with Apollo, his technique is significantly improved from 1 and 2, and then of course, after the training, his technique has improved even more. So I do like that. With each movie, you do see him noticeably improving. I think that's a great touch. Which again, we touched upon the fact that Clubber really does not have any degree of sympathy for Apollo whatsoever, and he antagonizes him, which makes Apollo not happy with Clubber, and so he's like, give us all a present and knock this chump, all right? And of course, Rocky can't, but that also makes sense why Apollo would go to train Rocky, because he's been there. He knows how it feels to feel defeated, and he wants to give Rocky the tools by which to do
Which
this
is
thing the
why I
right
think
way.
when he takes him back to the original boxing place that he was brought up in, and that first walk in where there is not a white man in the house,
Nope.
and
Well,
they just all look at him with this hungry edge.
we're gonna get there in just a bit, but I think
that was a great line there with Paulie, and Rocky's like, I don't like these people, and Rocky's like, well, maybe they don't like you too, and he's like, well, what did I do to them?
yeah,
It's kind of odd, like, well, what did they do to you? Like, why don't you like them?
yeah, that was a great line, and I mean, and Brandon touched on this earlier, but yeah, like Polly was never exactly a savory character in
So he was
No.
kind
1
of
and 2,
Yeah.
but like he's
He's
being
kind
like,
of a douche in this one, yeah.
well, he's being like, well, okay, so in the opening, even he's like drinking a lot. He's directionless.
Yep.
He's your standard like mooching
smashes
relative.
beautiful pinball machine.
Totally
Yeah, well, he's your
pity party me. What have you done for me lately? And
well,
it's
he's your standard like mooching relative for someone who happens to make a lot of money, and you see that a lot with like people who win the lottery or come into money all of a sudden, that kind of stuff. But so that's in the
yeah.
beginning. Then here, when Apollo starts to train Rocky, then Polly really starts saying a lot of racist stuff, and
Yep.
it's like, again, not exactly surprising relative to the way that the character's set up, but still, it's like, man,
They really wanted you to hate Paulie on this one,
well, but but at the same time, I have to say that whole exchange with like, what do I do to them? Like, kudos to Burt Young for selling that bit, because it's very funny. It's very indicative of character, and also like
Right.
that has to be one of the best and like quickest summations of the stupidity of racism
Racism,
itself.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
because it's
Right.
you can not like a certain group of people, but then as soon as the shoe's on the other foot, then you're like, and he's just the fact that he's so oblivious to it. I'm like, oh, that's perfect,
Right.
It's like that summed up the whole fallacy right there in just like a
Right.
few seconds.
Yep.
Because that's one thing that a lot of times people overlook or forget, is that a lot of times racism is reflexive and ingrained and not fully intentional, but that doesn't mean it's any less harmful or hurtful or
Right.
inappropriate.
For sure. And clearly with Polly, it's lack of self-awareness. It's, lack of exposure, I'm sure. And also, Italian Americans weren't exactly held in high esteem by, predominantly white Anglo-Saxon Protestant society at the time. They still had it better than most black people, of course, but it's to such a degree that you can understand why tensions would be there. But for Polly, it's mostly just that he's an idiot, and just a
Yeah.
not so great guy in the first place. But yeah, that whole scene, I like the tension that he has with Apollo in the beginning, which then gets paid off with when the fight's going well and Apollo kisses him, and I was like, oh, that's great, because they have their own little mini character arc there. But it is nice to see Apollo's old stomping grounds and just what a not so great area he came from, albeit on the complete other coast. Um, and one other, again, another kind of sociological observation. So yeah, the gym is like all black, and Apollo is, he like, certain people know who he is, but he's also not like, he is welcomed back with open arms, but like they also don't like rush him immediately either, which I think is an interesting thing. And part of it's because they're so focused on their own training, but once they figure out, oh wait, it is Apollo, then they immediately swarm him. But I think it's an interesting sociological observation there, as far as you do see much more of a kind of obvious separation there than you would necessarily see nowadays. And also they definitely do have the Eye of the Tiger, unquestionably. They have more of that street angst. It's just of a different sort because, LA was not exactly a racial Shangri-La, as we know. But it's great to see. It's great to see Duke, in Rocky's corner. This time, I think that's a great touch.
Yeah, it was great when he shook his hand. He's like, it's great to be, on your side this time.
For sure, and he's one of the most criminally underrated characters in the whole series, I think. Great performance. The temptation, I think, this is what I was going to say. The temptation, I think, if one were to just watch this in a vacuum, which I'm not sure why you would, but without having seen the other two, but I'm sure that there would be a temptation to kind of fit this into the whole, black person training the white person or helping the white person in some way. It would be tempting to fit it into that mold. And plenty of movies have done that. The only difference here is that, again, we've had 2 other movies prior to this, and, here it feels like a much more natural kind of extension of these characters' relationship.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I
It's not
agree.
forced.
Normally, I would go there myself to the magical. Well, I'm not going to say the word character, but this one, like you said, it establishes Apollo as his own character, and I don't feel like that's really, like I say, though there is some racial subtext in the movie, I really don't think that it's a strong racial subtext.
It's not its primary goal, that's for sure.
And some of it, like I say, with Clubber, I know it's not that intentional, and if it is, it's very low level intentional.
For sure. And again, I would chalk that up more to performance than I would necessarily even the writing. But yeah, because we've had 2 other movies building up that relationship, and especially from 2, with just how much he was brimming with pride and wanting to just beat Rocky's ass for reasons that you can totally understand, and then to see them come back together as friends, it's like you buy it, it's not phony, it's not tropey, and that speaks a lot to the writing and the fact that we had 2 other movies prior to that.
Right. And one scene that I will mention, because again, I didn't really get to jump in on the 2, but there is that notable scene where you see Apollo at home, and you see he is just going on and on about the nasty fan mail, and his wife pretty much tears him a new one for it, or at least kind of indicates that she intends to do so. And that definitely kind of sets the stage for the more humble Apollo we see in this movie.
For sure.
Because you feel like he has been probably schooled by her at least a few more times in the last 3 years. And again, having seen the Creed movies, this has given me some interesting context on those too. I'm looking forward to revisiting those, but it looks like I agree. You can buy them kind of coming together and working together in this one, partly because of the things they've set up in the movies before, but yeah,
for sure.
But also partly because Apollo is given that grounding, and
Yeah, well, he's coming at it from a more genuine place of like he's been where Rocky is now, so he knows what it feels like to having been on top and having lost it from someone who was hungry, and that's where you get the Eye of the Tiger speech. And this is where you get into the same thing that was not so good in 2 and is also not so good here, which is you get so much of mopey Rocky who, again, his biggest enemy is himself as far as not having the enthusiasm to train and that kind of stuff. It's a bit overly extended, even more so than it was in 2. And those were definitely my least favorite parts of 2. And, it's a little bit like, okay, we get it, move on. Um, and that, but again, it does result in a great scene with
They,
Adrian.
they don't go nearly as far down that rabbit hole as they do in the movie Southpaw, though.
Yeah, yeah.
I will say 2 really did that did bother me a lot. It frustrated me, and then having Adrian go into that coma
Mhm.
thing. I mean, that was just it was frustrating, and this was
Yeah.
frustrating as well. I think in a movie like this, where you're really not going for as much of a serious vibe, they really didn't need to go there.
Mhm.
Not to this level, if anything.
Well, again, that's what I brought up before with the padding. I feel like everything in the first half could have been significantly, the pace could have been picked up, or could have, you could have put your emphasis on different things, could have given Clubber more dimension, etc. And then here in the second half, you probably didn't need to spend as much time with Mopey Rocky. It's like we saw this in 2. His biggest enemy is when he doesn't believe in himself. We get it. Let's move on. So that's easily some of my least favorite parts of
But
3.
Adrian had a great speech.
Yes, and that is a great moment between the characters, definitely. And it wouldn't have gotten there had we not seen some of that mopiness. But I was just like, we get it. We've seen this. But yeah, it's a great scene with her. It's probably one of her best scenes in the series, without a doubt. And we get to this movie's training montage, which I gotta say, I heard it kind of through the grapevine. I remembered it in my memory, and then I actually watched it again, and I was like, "Oh my god, this thing is as homoerotic as the playing with the boys volleyball scene in Top Gun." Like, it's like, holy crap! This thing is like, you got, they're shirtless and sweaty in the gym, then you get the close-ups on their crotches as they're running on the beach, and they're, like, hugging
Oh, it's
as they
definitely a
jog.
bromance.
They're hugging as they jog, and it's like, are they gonna start making out here? And
Well,
then
again, they had to have fan service for the dates that were dragged to the movie, right?
yeah, the dates of, 2 guys that are totally just friends, wink, wink. And, it's so and again, talking about the sociological context, it's so funny because, again, the '80s were not a particularly good time to be gay.
No.
And yet, I'm thinking of, like, this movie, Top Gun, Sleepaway Camp, Nightmare on Elm Street 2, like, as far as, like, homoeroticism that by modern standards, you wouldn't even call that subtext, like, it is so overt, but it must have flown over people's heads, in the '80s, or they must not have seen it that way, or I don't know what,
I
but
know I didn't.
for such
Even
a
this time, I didn't see it that way.
Oh, I saw it big time. But I've also seen other examples of it, so I know what to compare it against. But like, it's for such a homophobic decade, it's like, man, the '80s were such a interesting time for homoeroticism. I think it was partially because that was kind of the decade of the action movie, of like the super macho action movies. And usually what you get to a certain place where you're so macho that you might as well, go all the way with it, and it's like, especially when you get the slow-mo, jumping around when they're jogging, and I'm like, oh wow, this is incredible, and it, not to mention the,
I think you're gonna ruin the rest of the movies for me. I'm just gonna say that now.
I'm gonna ruin it even more. I'm gonna ruin it
Oh,
even more because
He finally found a way.
well, I'm gonna ruin it even more because, well, if you win this fight, Stallion, you owe me something. What favor? And it's like,
Right.
yeah, and keep
I
in
did
mind,
notice that. That
well,
I
so
noticed
there's that,
a
and
little
then
bit, but yeah.
and then guess what? So when they do their little private fight with just themselves, just for them, guess what they do? Well, they're both shirtless, duh. But then you see they have these like weird cod pieces on that you've never seen
Right.
in any of the sparring matches up to now. And I'm like, wow, you really just had to, like, you had to go all the way with this metaphor here, which I am sure was probably unintentional, but like, just looking at it through modern eyes, I'm like, wow, this is all over this this whole thing. And it's definitely at the very least a bromance between these two, if not,
Right.
unintentional homoeroticism. But like, seriously, watch the whole training montage again, and I'm like, oh my god, it's all over the place. Not to mention, you got the '80s fashions of like, I'll never be able to unsee like those male exercise shirts that are basically like the male equivalent of training bras. It's like, again, like, come on, dude, come
80s
on.
is the best decade. I stand by this.
Yeah, but like,
Well, I don't know. It definitely was a little bit of wobbling with Hulk Hogan up there. I don't.
yeah, but you get what I'm getting at. I mean, I think it's fairly
It
obvious.
could have
Like,
gone there could have been an extra note of that, but they couldn't get the rights. Supposedly, Eye of the Tiger was an afterthought. Supposedly, they wanted Queen, Another One Bites the Dust for the soundtrack, but they
really,
weren't
Great
able to get
song,
it.
but I'm
that's
so glad Eye of
interesting.
the Tiger made it.
Well, I had the Tiger I like a lot more, and I'm not really
Right.
sure that Queen fits Rocky, at least to me. But at any rate,
Maybe we
um,
are the champions, but
maybe, but that would have been a little too obvious, I think.
right.
I mean, I'm not a fan of that song anyway because it's so overused. But
That's a
I
good
did
song.
want to mention really quick that um, uh, Rocky Jr. Was played by the voice of Timothy from Secret of Nim.
oh, cool. We're gonna. It's not an issue yet, but we're gonna get into the continuity errors with Rocky Jr.'s age. Not an issue yet, but it will be. But
Yeah, come to think of it, let's see, how old was he in this movie?
he would have been like, maybe he looks like he's about 5 or 6, something like that. It becomes
Uh,
it becomes more of an issue in 5.
yeah, I would say 5 or 6 is still that's an extra year or two. I think
Yeah, maybe
there
overly generous, but because
they
Was he
the
must
like a
have given him
teenager in 5?
they must have given him some sort of like a growth booster or some such thing.
yeah, maybe, but the
It was all those Wheaties he was eating.
yeah, that's it. But the interesting thing I think about this film in terms of the training and also Rocky's technique in the final fight is just that you have never seen Rocky this nimble. He finally learns how to like get on his toes, and
Yeah.
and paradoxically, well, not paradoxically, but like as part
You
of it
can't
is
train a
him.
white fighter like a black fighter. He's
Well,
not
it's
gonna get
him
it.
having to learn how to dance as ostensibly, and just
Yeah.
and Paulie gets in some good zingers when they get him to swim, and it's like, can he swim with a name like Rock?
Yeah.
That was a good line.
Yeah,
Uh,
it was.
but yeah, it's again relative to 1 and 2. You look at Rocky, and he's so nimble and actually like trying to have rhythm, and I'm like, wow, this is like
Yeah, totally.
light
Like all
years
those
ahead of where
all
he
those
was.
dodges were just incredible. It was like, damn,
Mhm.
doing dodge like that. And I love the way he was punching
Mhm.
him too. Like he was a bag, like one of those little punching bags. He's like, "Wah, wah, 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 wah,
Yeah,
wah."
but you can it's just a sea change from this big lumbering ox,
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
first
Like
2
I said,
movies.
he was more Creed / Rocky in this one than he was just Rocky. You can see a lot of Creed in him in this one.
For sure.
Um,
Well,
but
up to and including he wears the American flag
yeah, yeah.
trunks, which is a good
Make sure
touch.
you wash them before you give them back to me.
Yeah, because that doesn't sound gay at all. But anyway, the final fight admittedly is kind of on the short side, but we do see Rocky apply what he's learned. Um, and Clubber gets some of his best dialogue in that lead up to the fight, because that's when he finally says, "I pity the fool," and that's when he says the one that I really love, which is prediction pain. And I'm like, yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that's what you want a villain to say before
I did
you.
like his delivery of that line. It was a
Spoiler
good
alert.
villain line.
Yeah, that's But we haven't really mentioned about Hulk Hogan. He kept calling him a meatball. That was
Yeah,
hilarious.
that was funny.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it reminds you back. It reminds you back. Back when Mickey said it to him, called him a meatball. And he's like, oh, I don't like that. You know. And
Like
called
that
meatball.
when the fight is done, I do like that he just like, yeah, sure, we'll take a Polaroid, whatever.
Yeah,
It-
it was really
it's-
cool afterwards. Like
well, because he knows it's all
what
a
you on me? That's the name of the game, brother.
well, because being a wrestler, it's like obviously he knows it's all a gag anyway. But anyway, I think the lead up to the fight with Clubber that's some of his best moments in the whole thing, and he definitely does not miss an opportunity to badmouth Rocky even before he gets the title and after, and he's definitely the kind of person you can tell he does not forgive, he doesn't forget, he's God help him if he had a Twitter account because he would
Yeah. But
he would go nuts on
he
people.
looked like a freight train that had burned him over. Like he didn't even know where the hell he was. Like he was just like completely totally wasn't expecting Rocky to come out like that. Like he was just like,
Mhm.
what the hell just hit me?
For sure. Which I mean, and for a while there, it does look like it's gonna be, a repeat of the first fight in terms of how it goes. Because again, give Rocky some credit, despite having been a little, lonely at the top there. When he fights Clubber the first time, he does come out swinging. He doesn't bullshit around, but
Yeah.
obviously Clubber gets the best of him because Rocky doesn't have the eye of the tiger anymore. But then here, same kind of thing. Rocky doesn't bullshit around. He comes out swinging.
Yeah.
Clubber comes back, hits hard, and
But
the
the thing here is Rocky knows what his best hits are, and he just goads him and goads him, and
yeah,
which wears him down even more because the dude's making these big, huge swings.
yeah.
You
He
know,
he he rope he
it
rope
may not
ropes
have
him.
gone a lot of rounds,
Well, and he's
but you
ducking
can
a lot
definitely
of.
see it.
He's
He's doing
ducking
a better
lot of
job
hits.
of dodging the blows than he
Yeah,
ever
which
did.
also tires him out as well because swinging and missing all that time can
Yeah,
tire you out as well. So he definitely tires him out super fast. I mean, he's big. He's not used to going rounds. He just knocks people the hell out.
yeah.
And
Well,
you know,
his fighting style, Clubber's style, is so distinctly different from either of them because and
He
you
was
can
brought up straight street.
yeah,
yeah,
well,
I
you
don't. I
can
don't think he could. I don't think he could actually go 4 or 5 rounds.
I don't yeah,
It's just
that's clearly not his style.
exactly. So I think
Well,
them ending it in 3 rounds
see,
was good because
Well,
no,
but
it
I
just
disagree
moves
because
fast.
again, Tyson was
Yeah,
identical to Clubber in a lot of ways, and Tyson was also a street fighter who
yeah. But
was all there.
Tyson was a little more polished than Clubber Lang, though.
Well, like Clubber Lang, Tyson was used to finishing his fights in no more than 5 rounds at most.
mhm.
Right. I mean, I get
And
that.
so, I mean, I think that Clubber could have lasted longer himself. It's just again, he trains excessively hard. I have a
Right.
feeling like he would have been able to at least last 4 to 5 rounds and not just go down in 3.
Yeah, well,
Because again,
Maybe,
all
but I
business.
think
I
Rocky
think that
really tired him out.
because I think that if that was the case, Rocky could have still been able to tire him out with just being punched to death by the 3rd round. You'd have seen him wear out. But in the 2nd round of that fight, Clubber was barely breathing hard,
Yeah,
and Rocky gave him some really hard shots in that first fight. So that would say that he was even worse condition in the 2nd fight than he was in the first fight, which I don't know. I just don't think that. I think that it could have been a little bit longer. You could have shown a little bit more of that. Why is this dude not falling down? Something
Mhm.
like that. Just if anything, just as a
well,
more
they
of
do
a
that more in 4, because
like I
Ivan
say.
Drago.
I
Go
mean,
ahead.
I don't even see the point of having the last fight at all. Just say he won it and be done.
Well,
I thought it was a
like,
great fight. It was quick, but it was still good.
I think it's a pretty good fight too. I mean, it's one thing I will say, I think it's interesting observing their differences in style because, like we mentioned, Rocky is definitely fighting more like Apollo in.
Yeah, it was great seeing him dodge all those hits and hitting him like a punching bag, the speed bags and shit.
On him actually like knowing how to move,
Yeah,
but also he hasn't lost what made him
makes him
who he,
Rocky.
well, yeah, he hasn't lost who he was in the first two because honestly, Rocky's greatest strength in the first two movies was he could just take
getting hit.
he could just take a lot of abuse and then come back with a few hard hits, after
Which is why
having.
he said, "Hey, man, I know what I'm doing."
Yeah, well, and that's
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying. Like he is able to move, but he also knows well enough that he can take a lot of abuse. And Clubber being all business, being a hard hitter, and like you look at his swings. Clubber tends to kind of swing from the outside. Like
Yeah.
he virtually doesn't jab really or do any.
No, he does. Everything was hard swings. Like he wants to knock you out in every hit he does.
Yeah,
his
he
trainer
put all
even
his
says
weight
that. He says,
behind each
you don't
one.
need to do that. Don't do that. And that's all he does is just swing like he wants to knock you out with every hit.
Yeah, and that's so different from both Rocky and especially Apollo. Apollo was definitely a jabber. You could
Yeah.
tell he was definitely much more light on his feet, a jabber. He would do, more of what you might expect a typical boxer to do.
Another one in this one too is you notice, in the other fights, he was always doing a ton of body shots.
Mhm.
This one, he was doing way more face shots than body shots. He got a few body shots, but he was doing way more face shots.
Yeah, well, because Apollo's great weakness was the body, but then Rocky later realized, oh wait, yeah, I can go for the head this time, But yeah, it was a good, good to see Rocky doing a different strategy relative to each fighter. I think it's a good touch that they do in the movies. But yeah, he just is able to come back and win the fight. And the part that does kind of make me laugh, I unintentionally make me laugh, is that okay, Rocky wins, gets the title back. He obviously has taken a lot of abuse from Clubber, but not as much as he did before, but still enough to, I'm sure, wear him out. Wins the title back, jumps really high in the air, and does this like Pete Townsend, knees on the ground. I'm like, yeah, like with Who Are You? That whole thing. It's like, man, this guy's got a lot of energy still. It's amazing.
I know they're like, oh, Rocky looks tired. I'm like, no, he doesn't. Clubber fucking looks tired. Clubber's going the hell out, but Rocky still looks like he could go a couple more rounds.
Well, and when was the last time you ever saw a boxer like jump that high and then fall to his knees like he's, sliding across the stage? I just that
I don't
made
really
me
watch
laugh.
boxing, but I don't think that's ever happened.
That kind of made me laugh, But and then of course, we end off on a good note with the fight with just him and Creed, and they have some good lines of dialogue as far as it's too bad we got to get old, which it's because they aren't neither of them are exactly young guys.
Right.
Yeah, and
athletic
Rocky's
age.
jibing him with him being older and stuff too, which I
Yeah,
thought was pretty funny too.
Even though
I mean,
Stallone's older in real life.
yeah, and it ends off on a nice note because again,
Yeah.
you get the sense that yes, they are friends, but they'll always have that friendly
Rivalry.
rivalry with each other, and and for good reason because they did go the full 15 rounds both
Mhm.
times, and that's there's something to be said for that,
And it is nice that they didn't that they just showed like the opening move and that was it. And it was like
Yeah, we
it
didn't
was
need
kind
to
of
didn't need to do the whole thing.
well, it was like that was a moment between them, and we knew that it was
Yeah.
happening, And that's all that we really needed to know. And I know we got an answer to that in I think it was the first Creed. We got an answer to that, but still, up until then, it was kind of just hanging in the air. Like, okay, well, they had a fight, and it was just a fun little match.
Well, and in Rocky, not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but in Rocky 4, Rocky's coming home from having had a fight with Creed, and we kind of get the implication that this is something that they do, fairly regularly, that they're, good sparring partners. I mean, you could have probably read that as like him having come home from that fight specifically, but I don't think that's the case. I think that it's probably something that they get in the habit of, just because, well, they were good rivals,
I'll find out next week, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, you could read it as him having come home from this fight, but then that's when you really get into some of the Rocky Jr. age continuity errors, which again, that becomes a real problem in 5, but we'll get there later. But in terms of how to shoot a fight, obviously there's considerably more polish here. In terms of the cinematography, they don't have to do all the obvious tricks like they had to do in 1 to hide the ring, the fact they don't have a big crowd, etc. They don't have to do any of that. But this is where you get into even more slow-mo with the fights, even more reverberations in the soundtrack, sweat, just punches, having tons of sweat, in slow mo, and the sound effects, sounding like sledgehammers, that kind of stuff. You really do get into some of that kind of cartooniness in the fight, but again, not quite on the level of 4, but we'll get there later. But you definitely see some of the over the topness in the fights themselves. It does make them a bit more kind of blockbuster friendly, but you go back to 1 and you think about how understated those sound effects were, and that sounds a little bit more similar to what an actual fight might sound like, because they're not that loud, when it comes to the sounds of punches hitting people and that kind of stuff. But, still in terms of how to shoot a fight, each one does noticeably improve because, well, they got money and experience, kind of like, the Star Wars trilogy, Return of the Jedi, the stunts have quite a lot more polish in them than A New Hope, But I do find it kind of amusing in the final fight you have a lot of no, for the people on the sidelines, which that's kind of a cliche now in and of itself, but I assume that this kind of helped to lay the groundwork for a lot of that. We all kind of know the slow mo no, that nowadays it's so unbelievably cliche, but I think we have to for sure talk about music, especially Eye of the Tiger, which didn't most of us here say that whenever we think of Rocky music that we kind of instinctively think of Eye of the Tiger rather than
I said that.
Pretty much.
Yeah. And that's saying
I mean,
a lot.
hell, you think of sports movies, you usually think Eye of the Tiger.
Yeah. And that's saying a lot because again, Gonna Fly Now is in this movie in the training montage with Apollo.
Yeah.
But you can tell it is significantly de-emphasized relative to what it was. And Eye of the Tiger is clearly what they're trying to push.
Well,
and it's not even in 4 and 5.
They basically use, if I'm remembering correctly, they basically use Going to Fly Now, like you said, for the training, what you think is going to be the big training montage. And then he kind of craps out. And it's like when he really gets his second win, when he gets his mojo back, that's when you get Eye of the Tiger.
But as far as like a secondary theme or an alternate theme or whatever you want to say, because sometimes in franchises when they want to put a new coat of paint on something, most of the time it really backfires.
Is in 4.
Yeah, I said it is, but I'm saying Gonna Fly Now isn't in 4 or 5, if I recall. But yeah, Eye of the Tiger features heavily in 4. But that's what I'm saying. Like every time that a franchise, when they try to put a new coat of paint on something, particularly in the musical department, most of the time it backfires unbelievably. But not this time. Eye of the Tiger is incredible. I mean, and unlike Gonna Fly Now, that one got considerable radio airplay and still does to this day. It's just that
One,
good.
one
Well,
could
I think the
one
song's
could
incredible,
argue.
but
Go
I
ahead.
I actually think of the original. When I hear the original theme, that's when I think of Rocky, not
Yeah.
Eye of the Tiger.
I
I
mean,
mean,
Gonna
I
Fly Now unquestionably is associated with Rocky.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
when you hear it, you think Rocky.
you can
But
definitely hear both, but
just
you
say
know,
Rocky, I think I have Tiger.
sometimes you do. Are they? You're right. Sometimes they try and fail miserably to do that. A good example of that would be, even though the music, I still haven't seen the movie, sadly, but even though the music is excellent in Frozen 2, they tried so hard to replicate Let It Go, and they
I
just
haven't
did
seen it.
not do it. They just did
Mhm.
not. They couldn't do it. This one, another one where I can think of where they kind of had success would be, and I'm sure Kroll, this might be fighting words for you. Um, but I would say when I think Star Wars, yes, I think the Star Wars theme, but I really think the Imperial March. And I'm pretty sure they did not have that until Empire, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, it wasn't
So,
until
I
Empire.
yeah.
mean, I hear you. I definitely the Imperial March is definitely a big part of Star Wars as well.
Mhm.
I mean, but I just think Darth Vader when I hear it. I don't think Star Wars. I think Darth Vader. Um, so
It almost
to
is a
me
character theme,
the
yeah.
yeah the original the original theme is Star Wars to me, but the Imperial March is Darth Vader. It's not even the Imperial. I mean, it's supposed to be all Imperial, but it's to me it's just Darth Vader. You know, um, I just always picture him walking down, and more like in Return of the Jedi. So yeah, I hear you, and I get that it is very iconic. I
Well, but
laugh when some people put it on their ringtones for loved ones.
no, I had the Imperial March as a ringtone of mine for a while, but what's interesting, I think, about the
I can't
music of
remember. I think
3,
I had it for work.
I can
the
see it for
music
work, but when you have like your wife or your mom or something, it's kind of funny.
My dad has the whistling theme from The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly for my mom.
well,
I don't know about that.
I think the music of 3, I mean, well, obviously we love Eye of the Tiger, that song basically made Survivor as a
Yeah.
band, still what we automatically think of when we think of Survivor. Um,
Yeah.
I think Bill Conti's score, obviously, it still works, but like we hear a lot of the familiar themes from the first 2 movies.
Mm-hmm.
Not a whole lot terribly new from Bill Conti this time.
I
Uh,
do feel that his theme is more front and center in the second and third movies. Like the first movie, it's there, but it accompanies the film. It's more of a, there's only a few points where you just really notice the music, but in 2 and 3, I noticed the music a lot more.
mhm.
But yeah, right. It probably wasn't a whole lot of new stuff, but it may have been new ways of using the music. I think, and overall, I like the way the music was used with this.
Yeah, well, the grief piano music when Mickey dies, we had heard that before, but it's used well there. Maybe because, well, the emotion of the moment is obviously that's one of the stronger moments in the movie. But it's not. There was more newness in 1 and 2 when it came to the music, which is not terribly surprising. But obviously, whenever you think of Rocky 3 and music, you think of Survivor, duh, because it's just that damn good. The only other things I can really think of that we haven't really touched on is kind of a minor point, but like, so Rocky 1, they were even talking about retirement even then. And then Rocky 2, it's what does Rocky do with life, after boxing, more or less, and how he really can't do much else. Um, and then Rocky 3 talking about retiring again. And it's like,
That's why
think
I made the joke earlier about who retired, who's said they're gonna retire more than Ozzy and Days Like or Kiss, and yeah.
yeah, it's just like
Or
he
like
says it in almost every movie.
how many times has Hayao Miyazaki retired at this point? Or
Who?
Yeah, it gets a little bit. This is where it
yeah.
starts to get a little ridiculous in terms of like, yeah, right. Especially when you know how many other sequels and stuff there are after this. I'm like, yeah, right.
Well, he says it. He says it like twice in 3. So
Well, he wants to retire before he fights Clubber Lang,
yeah, exactly.
and
Before
then
he
he
even
wants to
fights
fight.
Cloverland, and
Yeah,
then
he
he
wants
wants
to
to
have one
retire
more
again after
fight.
he fights him.
Yeah, it's like, wow, just that part of the franchise was always laughable, especially
To
when you
me,
know
it's
how
not
many.
until he propositions his wife until he's all in.
Oh, for sure. One, again, that would, I think anybody would.
Because
That,
Adrian is his heart. He insulted her, so now it's
well,
on.
that, and I think any guy, you say that about his wife, that's gonna make him snap. But particularly someone like Rocky, who, like you said, Adrian is his heart and soul, pretty much.
Yeah,
But I
and
I
he is
brought
the fighter.
yeah, I brought it up because the Rocky statue is as iconic as the Rocky Steps, and there's an interesting history with the Rocky statue because it was first there at the top of the steps to honor the first movie, and it was made for the movie. But then the statue was donated by the studio to the city of Philadelphia, um, so as gifted to the city, and the statue has resided in a couple different spots. Like it was at the top of the steps, and then it got removed, and then it got moved down to the bottom of the steps, and then I think it might have even gotten moved to like an adjacent part of the not so much at the bottom of the steps, but like close to the different part of the museum or something. It's been moved around a lot, but from what I understand now, I think it's at the foot of the steps. But it hasn't been forgotten about, entirely. But there was a time when it wasn't there anymore, and obviously that didn't make people happy because that is one thing that has about this movie, besides Survivor, besides Mr. T, that the statue has endured, because you saw it in 5, and it's just been a part of culture since then. But this is where
I'm
it
sure
came
people
from.
go there just to see it.
Oh,
Yeah.
for sure. Well, it's, Rocky is a very important film in general, but the series has an important cultural tie to Philadelphia as a city, and they are very proud of the movies and proud of the character, proud of what he represents, and I'm sure it has helped tourism quite a bit. But and I've never been to Philadelphia, but if I ever
Me
go,
neither.
then you bet I'm gonna, visit all those places. Because how could I not?
And still no cheesesteak.
No, somehow they missed the boat on that one. Um, let's see. Anything else that we left out? But otherwise, I mean, we can talk about it. Any favorite moments or lines of dialogue?
I think we've covered everything 20 ways from Sunday.
For sure. Well, Dustin, favorite scene or line of dialogue?
For me, it's probably still just the training montage showing the contrasts between like their two styles.
Yeah, yeah.
So like I just really like showing like the brutality of this is our like first like real villain. So I've not really had a whole lot to say because everybody's covered everything like so heavily. So
Mm-hmm.
so Although I have noticed a lot of people seem to think that Eye of the Tiger is from the other Rocky movies,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't realize that it's from this one. Like they think
Yeah,
it's
that is a bit bizarre,
pretty
but
funny.
it does feature in 4 very heavily. So I mean, I could understand the confusion on that one, but not on
Well,
the
people think it's
previous
from Rocky
one,
1 and 2, which is the
which
weird thing.
that's a bit ludicrous. But yeah,
Well,
thinking it
Well,
was
it's
from
associated with Rocky so strongly.
yeah,
Yeah.
You know, and all of these movies do flow very well into each other.
they
Even
do.
I
But like
thought,
I could understand the confusion with 4 just because it features prominently there too. You know.
even
well, and
I thought that it might have been in 2, but I've only visited like 2 through. Well, I've visited 4 more often than I have like the rest of them, except Rocky. I've seen like over and over. It's just I thought that Eye of the Tiger started in 2, but I was dead wrong.
Yeah, I thought it started in 1. So
Well,
Well, and again,
at any
part,
rate,
part of the issue is that Rocky has so permeated the public consciousness that it's one of those movies that even if you've never seen it before, you've heard of it and you probably think you know a little bit about it.
Mhm.
And the same
yeah,
thing's
you know
true
a
of the
little
song.
bit. Exactly.
Yeah, it's it's definitely possible. Well, Dave, favorite scene or line of dialogue?
I'm gonna head out. I'll be back for the next one in a little bit.
Okay,
there's no next one.
have a
Right.
good night.
Oh, that's next week?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Rocky 4 is next week.
Oh, I thought we were doing it right after. Well, I guess I'll stay.
Well, you're ahead of the game on that one.
At least you've seen the movie this time.
Dave, favorite line of dialogue or scene?
Favorite scene is the whole scene between Adrian and Rocky when he it really is in dire straits in his mind and stuff, and she really gives him the pep talk that he really needs. And I like that moment a lot. Um, just because it shows how strong of a character Adrian is in his life, even
Mhm.
though in the future movies she seems to go to the back of the room.
Mhm.
But that being said, favorite lines. I'm gonna have to just say the whole line that Apollo says about the eye of the tiger. That I think that pretty much sums up the film.
Yeah, that is kind of the movie in a nutshell, pretty much. Tammy, favorite scene or line of dialogue?
Well, I know that some people that don't like that the last fight, and some people they shouldn't have been in there. But I do like the last fight scene, and I like how Rocky is just like, come on, that's it, come
Yeah,
on,
he's definitely more comfortable with, taunting the opponent than he ever was before.
So I like the whole scene, and I like his taunting because it's just it's kind of different for him to actually do the taunting. So, but the scene itself, um, Mr. T's character is definitely a powerhouse with the way he hits, and but he, like we said, Rocky has learned a lot. He's learned a lot of, dodging and not just taking the hits. He's learned how to move, and I that whole ending scene where you know how many times he missed him. It was just like I was sitting here going, he missed him. He missed him. He keeps missing him. So I that's I guess why I thought it was a totally different scene, and that's why I liked it.
For sure. Brandon, favorite scene or line of dialogue?
I like the opening montage pretty well. I like that they had Clubber kind of stalking his matches and stuff like that, and then showing Clubber's fights. There was it showed a lot of promise for the movie.
Oh, for sure. Jake?
Well, pitiful.
That's
And
good stuff.
I do love that. Pain.
Yeah. Prediction.
Pain. Yes. Those were some good lines. And I guess although as far as lines go, I do like the end of what Dave mentioned, that scene where Rocky asks Adrian, "How'd you get so tough?" Or, you know,
Yeah, that's good stuff.
I thought that was pretty good. As far as overall favorite scenes, the scene with Rocky and Adrian is a contender. The couple of the scenes with Apollo, I think, might be contenders. And then for the movie overall, I mean, again, this is the movie that gave us Eye of the Tiger and I Pity the Fool. And though the public has forgotten, it also gave us Thunderlips. So
Indeed.
we gotta love that.
Nobody's forgotten it.
Yeah,
Dave.
we already know what Kroll's favorite scene is.
I have a few favorite scenes.
Elaborate.
Okay. Well, the wrestling scene, obviously, yeah, and especially when Rocky throws Hulk Hogan out or Thunderlips out.
Catch me!
It was also great the way Hogan was super slamming him and doing all the wrestling moves. The leg drop, definitely classic Hulk Hogan. So that was great. Just love that whole thing. But like Brandon said, the beginning montage, I absolutely loved that. I've kind of forgotten about that, and watching it this time, I was just right into it. I'm singing along the song. I'm watching everything, and you really see him fighting everything. And one big thing I noticed, and it made sense after hearing what Mickey says, is that he doesn't get looked beat up like he did when he fought Apollo. Like, he really doesn't look beat up at all. All these title fights, it just seemed like it was boom, boom, boom. I mean, obviously we didn't get to see the whole fights, but still, he didn't really look like he was beat up much at all on these fights. And then you realize, well, they weren't killers, as Nikki put it. And of course, the other scene is the final fight. I really loved seeing him be Creed and Rocky at the same time. The dancing around and the dodging all those hits, and then him goading him, saying, hit me, that's the best you got. Just completely goading him, taking his best shots and coming back harder than ever. Really letting him know that you're nothing. And I'm sure Clubber felt that at the moment when you could fucking think again. After he got got the license plate, the freight train that ran him over. And as far as the lines go, I've already mentioned a few. When Rocky says, how much you think he can eat about Thunderlips, and Mickey says 202, and then they announce Rocky's weight of 202, and the way Rocky just kind of looks at him, I thought that was really funny. And
that's good stuff there.
Yeah, and
Which
also the other one.
It's actually fair to point out, when you mentioned 202 there, it's fair to point out that when he rematches with Clubber Lang, he's actually lost a little weight, which is interesting.
I didn't even notice that.
Yeah, it's true. If you look back on it, he's actually like under 200 pounds, which is quite something.
Well, it matches what he was supposed to come in at, which is the other reason why I thought it was interesting when it talks about the weight classes, because with him dropping what he did for the fight and being so much
lower
leaner,
than heavyweight.
those punches Clubber did would have hit him like 10 times as hard. So it's like I say, but then again, it's a movie.
Well, it's
Yeah.
all about speed. That's one thing he most definitely didn't have before. But yeah, I'd say for me,
Oh, hold on 1 second. I ain't quite finished.
go for it.
Pauly's thing in the gym. Like I said, the whole
What did I do to them?
I don't like these kind of people, and well, maybe they don't like you too. What did I do to them? That was just so great. And again, and also his wife, basically yelling at him, getting to admit that he's afraid, and getting him come through it, and pushing him as a good wife would do. And I love her character. I love the way she's grown so much, and she's not that same person. And she became so tough because she was a fighter, like I said. So yeah. All right, now I'm done.
Well, I'm glad you had a lot to say with this one.
Well, like I said, this is my favorite one, so I really love it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think my favorite scene. I mean, I always liked the montage in the opening. I had a whole new level of respect for it now. But in terms of like just dialogue scenes and moments and stuff like that, I mean, I have to give Stallone credit for just how much he breaks down when Mickey dies and how he takes us on that journey with him, in a way that's believable for the character and in a way that not a lot of action stars could have done. So a lot of credit.
Not even regular stars could do.
Or yeah, right. Yeah,
He
for
tries
sure.
better than what.
Yeah, that's a specialized talent. It really is.
Yeah.
So that's a great scene. And then line of dialogue. I mean, I really do love the prediction pain. Like that's really awesome stuff. Oh yeah, I forgot the it was like, Mickey was saying, what kind of fighter would do this kind of stuff? Bob Hope would. And then he
Oh,
comes
you're right
in,
there.
it's like, you better call Bob Hope. That's a funny line. And then a line that I totally didn't I might have picked up on it when I was a kid, but like I remembered it now was when Mickey's out of commission, Rocky's fighting Clubber Lang for the first time, and Polly's like, "Yeah, I'm not a traitor, but just
Kill him.
go out and try to kill a guy."
Yeah.
I thought that was great. That was a great Polly line. But yeah, I think we covered it off pretty good. So thank you all, and we will resume the conversation with Rocky 4 at the same time next week, if I recall.
Definitely. So let's go around and do our outros. Let's go to you, Brandon. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
SeptumSin is SeptumSin versus the world. I'm not going to talk too much other than one Horrorween, our October programming is going to be starting up tomorrow night with a 3-part series about anime that you could watch for the season. So it's going to be very fun. And then on top of that, Sharkula, my latest psychoanalysis, has just gotten released today. So check it out if you want to see more about Sharkula. Any knowledge about a vampire shark is always good knowledge. Just in case.
Alrighty. Heading over to you, Dane. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Well, I am Dane Kyle, a filmmaker and YouTuber. My channel is Dangerous Arts, DANEJUROUS Arts, where you can find my series Oztober and August in Wonderland, where I did 31 days and 31 different film and TV adaptations of The Wizard of Oz and Alice in Wonderland specifically. I've got a lot of other projects in the works. And I want to make some more short films if I can. I don't want to leave that part of me unattended to, and same with scripts and that sort of thing. I've been trying to keep busy on a lot of different fronts, so definitely check those things out and stay tuned for more awesome content. And thank you everyone for joining me on this journey back through the Rocky series, because it is a great series of films and definitely one that means a lot to me personally.
Alrighty. Thank you for bringing it to us. I'm looking forward to the rest of the series. Heading over to you, Jake. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
All right. I'm Jake. I am the co-host of SeptumSin versus the World, and we have, well, as Brandon already said, we got a lot of fun stuff going on. This month, also for October, we'll be our anime anticlimax will be dealing with the short series Helsing Ultimate, so that's going to be fun. Or at least so I hear. I haven't gotten into it yet, but
I started
soon
it.
enough. And then meanwhile, I keep busy. I have a day job, as it were, but I also am the co-founder of RVA Homegrown Natives, where we grow all sorts of native plants and sell them locally, and got a couple of big sales going on this week, so that's pretty cool. Good way to kind of wrap up the fall, I guess. And then I try to keep busy with movies and such. I like to join these fine folks for their discussions, and I am enjoying my run through Rocky finally, much more than I anticipated, so that is a good thing. I also have some other movie projects every now and then. I did a little filming on something last night, and got word a few days ago that a short film I backed on Kickstarter is getting ready to hit the festival circuit. So, there's some little things going on here and there. Like to dip my finger in the pies every now and then. And it all keeps me pretty busy, but but that's all for me this time.
Alrighty. Heading over to you, Tammy. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Well, I'm David's fiance. I go on this site and another, talk about movies with everybody, and enjoy hearing everybody else's opinions. I collect my own movies and music, and well, now the summer's winding down. I am going to be putting my car away till next year.
Alrighty. Heading over to you, Thunderlips. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Well, I'm at the moment Thunderlips Kroll, aka Ron. But I'm disabled, so I don't work. But I watch TV, I watch movies, I read, I play mobile apps, keep myself occupied and busy as much as I can. And I come on this podcast. I come on this podcast on Sunday, Delusions of Grandeur, with Dave and Tammy. And I love talking about movies. I love watching them. Not every movie you watch I love, but I still like talking about them, even when I hate them. I like to get my opinion across. As you might have noticed, especially with this one. I did groan when we said we were doing Rocky, because I'm like, but I've actually really enjoyed doing I enjoyed doing the first two. And I think I enjoyed the third one now even more than I did before, which is great, and I'm sure I'll feel the same way before, and 5 as well, and I'll get to see 6 for the first time, and I'm probably gonna watch the Creed movies, even though we won't be covering them, just to round it all out and see what those are about.
Well, we can, as part of extra credit or whatever, if there's something particularly pertinent in the Creed movies, we'll be able to probably mention them towards the tail end of the Rocky Balboa episode. But
I was thinking of watching them after.
Yeah.
So, but I don't know. Maybe I'll watch it before.
Well, I'd recommend watching them before, just in case. But I'm glad that people are really enjoying the journey through these movies.
Yeah.
I mean, it is quite the journey.
I was hoping I guess part of 4 can be a horror movie, so I guess we get a little horror in October. I don't know. I'm not a huge horror fan, but I do like a little horror here and there, and do like a horror in October too. Speaking of that, I haven't watched any, so I gotta watch some. Yeah, I mean, won't spoil 4 for anyone, but there's a little horror in there, in my opinion. So yeah, that's my intro.
Alrighty, and my name is David Streggy. I'm one of the founding fathers of Inside Movies Galore. So thank you for coming along with us on this 5-year mission to explore strange new worlds in the moments of film. I think we've had a blast going through the films that we have, and I love that I've been able to visit these particular films, at least in consecutive order, because some of them are kind of blurry and sketchy to me. So I've had a blast. But I also moonlight under a different channel called Delusions of Grandeur, where we also go on and podcast on Sundays. And I go on with my compatriots, Tammy and Kroll there, and I think we have fun. Also, I did a recent pickup video with Kroll recently, so definitely check that out. Some of my newest pickups and stuff. And I ended up going on Shopaholics and showing most of it there too. So come over and check those channels out and see what I had to show around. This coming Sunday, the reason why I mentioned mentioned Star Trek reference is because we are going to be covering a boxing film that is in Leonard Nimoy's earliest of his career, called Kid Monk Barony. So hopefully you can come and check out our discussion on it once we hit it, because I came across this film, and honestly, it's not that bad. So, but in any case, like, share, and subscribe. Hopefully, you'll be back with us on our channel to hear what we have to say about the next in this installment. And hopefully, you all have a good night. And all I gotta say is, Adrian, I did it. But in any case, everyone say good night.
I pity the fool.
Pity the fool.